Greetings and welcome back to StarduskLP Game Talk. Today we're going to be talking about Mass Effect, the series in general, past, present, and future, and my thoughts on it. I think more than any other franchise, or series of games, if you will, Mass Effect was the one I, at least in the science fiction genre, had invested the most time and energy in. It definitely was, up until Mass Effect 3 at least, the game I paid the most attention to. I first came to Mass Effect via Mass Effect 2, then backtracked, played not actually that much of Mass Effect 1. I think I've only done, or had only done 1 or 2 playthroughs. Then just probably dozens of Mass Effect 2. And understandably, like many, many people, I was pretty psyched about the coming Mass Effect 3. But when it came out, of course, I too was disappointed, not just by the ending. I thought there were other serious issues going on. Now, I'm a deviant in this regard. Most people thought it was brilliant, except for the ending. That wasn't really my thought, though. I thought there were some serious issues going on. Now, the amount of these issues, it's a bit too great to cover in a single video. But let me just highlight some of the problems. Let's start with a very basic problem of the premise of Mass Effect. The Reapers. The Reapers, the great threat from dark space. The Reapers that we were warning the counselors about for years. The Reapers. Well, it was a great idea to begin with, in a way, because the Reapers represented, to my mind, at least in the beginning, an unknown threat, a foreboding evil, something we just didn't know about, lurking out in the darkness, in the vast expanses of dark space, the nothingness. That was a little more terrifying, or a lot more terrifying, this unknown threat, than what the Reapers eventually became, a known threat, something tangible, physical. It would have been nice if BioWare had perhaps kept that concept, but just kept it in the abstract the entire time. Rather than essentially materializing the threat. Using Sovereign as an intro, but also an end, might have been a good idea. Because when the Reapers took on a physical form, a lot was revealed, and eventually, if you Leviathan, I mean, that side story, you know the entire story, all in one. And sometimes it's good to keep mysteries in a game. Sometimes it's good to not let everyone know what's going on. Sometimes. Not always, sometimes. I think in the case of Mass Effect, with regards to the overall series and franchise, that's definitely the case. Now, having said that, we were stuck with what it was. The Reapers of a tangible material threat. The Catalyst, of course, terrible idea. I mean, the Deus Ex people criticize it, rightly so, I thought. My suggestion had been something quite different. No Catalyst, but in recognizing that the Reapers were techno-organic organisms developing some kind of biotech virus or something, which might actually involve venturing into dark space, or at least uncovering some clues as to the origin, and then bioengineering this virus to specifically affect maybe the genome of the Reapers or what have you. Something along those lines would have been a lot more satisfying than the Catalyst, the magic button that you press, basically. Overall, pretty lame in that regard. And the story, I think when you have a series that massive with the build-up from Mass Effect 1 to 2 and this, once again, this massive, now tangible threat, you can only fall from grace. I mean, how can you do justice to a Mass Effect series when the game development took, well, it was not a long time that they invested in developing Mass Effect 3. If they'd given another year, they could have expanded it more. It should have been just overall a much more expansive game, more areas to explore, the story, more dialogue, and so on and so forth. So I think overall, if I were to really summarize what I thought leading up to the terrible ending, what that was all the issues, then those issues were just kind of a feeling of it being rushed. Various areas, lack of closure, and so on and so forth. So once again, time, energy, investment issue with regards to that. And those were some of the, I thought, story-wise major issues. And of course, this has been covered at length by other people, so I don't want to go too much into that. But needless to say, in short summary, keeping the Reapers sort of ominous and foreboding might have been a good idea. Doing something along the lines of finding a solution based on their techno-organic nature as a means of stopping them. And of course, just investing more time story-wise. Now, as far as the game mechanics were concerned, I thought Mass Effect 3 failed. I'm specifically talking about combat, single-player combat. There was just no challenge whatsoever, zero. I mean, Insanity was a complete and utter joke. It felt like a beginner's game. Now, I don't know what happened because, at least in Mass Effect 2, Insanity was a reasonable challenge. And that just seemed to wither away. That was, for me, partaking in the story of Shepard was also about the combat. The combat wasn't just a sideshow. You know, engaging in the grueling combat to get to an end, to get to the goal, is part of the journey, or was part of Shepard's journey, in my opinion. And when they ruined the combat and made it child's play, I think the series and Mass Effect 3 specifically suffered. So the combat, the ideas were good, but there was just something really flawed about the combat system in single player. Now, having talked about single player, the whole series, let's talk about moving forward single player. Well, single player, I don't know what's to come. Now, it could be that they release a prequel. I think that's highly unlikely, but more likely a sequel. And to be honest, after the range of disappointments in single player in the last title, Mass Effect 3, I don't see myself getting very hyped up about single player. And I'm going to probably buy, assuming all the necessary variables, Mass Effect for whatever title they plan on giving it, but not for single player. It's going to be for multiplayer, which I'll get to in a bit. But I think it's my only suggestion with regards to single player is it would be nice for a change just not to have save the world kind of stuff. I mean, we get this all the time. It's a cliche. You don't need save the world. As a prequel, for example, I think it would be fascinating to explore, say, the Prothean Empire at its height. You know, maybe engage in smaller scale intrigues and things of that nature. But I doubt that's going to happen. And I really hope that BioWare drops, at least for this one instance, the whole mass threat. Everyone's being threatened. Of course, multiple race possibilities, a la Dragon Age, would be very welcome. Not even everything, but let's say the basic riff. There's so many. But let's say options for Turian, Solarian, Krogan, if it's a sequel, human, of course, and Asari. I mean, there are other races, of course, but leave it at that as a single player option. Something along, or if you want to cut it down even more, skip the Solarians. I mean, I could do without them, but something along those lines. and just make it about personal exploration and personal growth rather than save the world. Let's save the world, save the galaxy from the next threat. And in a way, they've kind of blown the lid off the can in many ways. You have to think about it logically. We know basically now, based on the revelations of Mass Effect 3, the lore, if you will, Mass Effect 3, the entire history of civilization going back literally billions of years, up to the ultimate cuttlefish, cephalopods, the the leviathans, if you will, and then leading to the creation of the Reapers, the Catalysts, and so on and so forth. That has become the standard narrative, and they can't change that. So we know how the civilization's developed. Now there could be new twists on that, I suppose. They'd have to be pretty inventive and pretty creative to make it work. Especially, I mean, you could just add anything willy-nilly, but to make it work well, you would need to be inventive and creative. However, all the more reason to deviate away from the let's save the galaxy theme. I mean, smaller scale intrigues, like I said, personal development, interaction on a much smaller scale, or just plain exploration. These are all things that could be integrated into either a prequel or a sequel with much success. So those are my thoughts on the single player aspect. Let's come to what used to be my baby, Mass Effect multiplayer. Now, as many of you know, I'm not blowing my own horn. To my knowledge, I was the first person to put out detailed guides and build guides for Mass Effect multiplayer. I was the first person to start talking about the viability of the Krogan soldier when no one else was telling me how shit it was, and so on and so forth. And a lot of who are still stuck around, that I was pretty well known for that in the Mass Effect multiplayer community, which since then, at least on PC, has died down. Of course, the filthy console peasants continue playing, but more props to them, I guess. But overall on PC, it's I don't know anyone I used to play with on PC that's still actively playing Mass Effect 3 multiplayer. But in my perspective, Mass Effect multiplayer was very much the saving grace of Mass Effect. If you look at the BioWare sociopathy forums, you'll see, in terms of the contributions, the threads that were created post, it's doubled that of anything else compared to, say, single player. It's over double that in some cases, and at least double that of what you find in the single player. Mass Effect multiplayer was massively fun. There's no doubt. I wouldn't have invested, a year plus of energy in making guides and videos on the topic if it hadn't been the case. And they really hit gold. And the profound thing about it is that they hit gold in spite of it being essentially a toss in the wind, a coin toss. Let's just see how this works out, see how it pans out. They've admitted several times that this was just an experiment. And this experiment turned out to be a massive success, probably beyond their wildest dreams. Given that fact, it's obvious, I think, or nigh obvious, that moving forward, BioWare is going to, for the next Mass Effect series or game, going to put out just a massive amount of resources and energy and time and development into multiplayer. Because if the last thing was an experiment, which was basically just a really fun horde mode, but we all enjoyed it for various reasons. For me, someone who doesn't play shooters, almost never does, I actually ended up playing a shooter. And I think for my age, I was easily the best player for someone pushing 40. Just because of the connection to the lore, connection to Mass Effect, being able to play the races, that was a big part of it. And there was almost a kind of a role-playing aspect to it, for me at least. But yeah, the grand experiment, which turned out to be a huge success. What if this time around, they don't just make an experiment? They invest the time, the energy, they make it just glean with success and glean with possibilities. Mix up the horde mode. I'd like to see something along the lines of tactical missions. Defuse the bomb would be a typical scenario, which involves specific classes. You have to have an engineer with the tech expertise to defuse the bomb. You might have infiltrators completely redone to be infiltrators, not super soldiers. Infiltrators that can actually infiltrate. You need an infiltrator to get the job done. Maybe you need an infiltrator to get access to the data store, and then it's transmitted over via the infiltrator to the engineer, who then disarm. I mean, something along those lines. Then maybe soldiers or vanguards can hold the line, and so on and so forth. That kind of team synergy, which never existed in Mass Effect multiplayer. Yes, you had bionic explosions and some tech stuff, but I mean, come on, that's really limited. I'm talking about real team synergy that was absolutely essential to winning a particular match or game. That didn't exist. And soldiers were just kind of universally overall more effective overall. After the various nerfs, I mean, the nerfs became just kind of this epic thing, this thread. What are they going to nerf now? Some of the decisions were just terrible, and some of the things they've introduced, when the Blood Pack Punisher came in, it was just pretty disappointing, so on and so forth. But overall, it was a huge success. A lot of things you could criticize. Moving forward, they need to build on that. So yes, tactical missions involving multiple classes as a requirement. If you want to succeed, then with a high probability, then you need this stuff. Maybe if you wanted to make it more challenging, you could just do all soldiers, and that would just be a lot more difficult. But something certainly along those lines. Expanding the classes a bit, maybe. Too much repetition. There was too much repetition in class builds. So the Krogan Shaman. This is a guy that I did my Thunderdome duo with, and someone that I always thought was pretty cool. As a tank, took a lot of damage. Warp was just universally a good thing. Warp was good. Damage bonuses with your weapons, and of course the incendiary glitch, the famed incendiary glitch. But what did he have on stock? He had barrier, he had warp, and he had shockwave. Not enough unique stuff going on there. Now, towards the end, the very last pack they released with the Krogan Warlord and the Geth Prime, if you will, the Collector Adept, and so on and so on. These were really kind of unique ideas, and this is the direction they need to take in Mass Effect multiplayer, without a doubt. Not just for one racial pack release, but on a consistent basis. To the extent that there is replication or duplication, limit it. I mean, keep it down to say 25%. Keep a margin, a percentile margin of how much repetition they're going to be. Only allow there to be one power overlap per series of classes. So if we're going to stick with the idea that each class has 3 powers, in the case of the Krogan Shaman, Warp, Barrier, and Shockwave, only one of them is going to really overlap with anything else in the Adept arena. I think let's keep the overall class system intact. Sentinel, that's well-established lore. It works well. I don't think there's any reason to change that. But within that spectrum, let's change it up. Keep a lot of variety, which was the real success point, which they kind of built on. They were moving more and more towards that. The Vorcha with Bloodlust, the Flamer, and so on and so forth. This was consistently built upon. And I think, overall, well done. Now, having said that, let's get to the RNG. The RNG, love it, hate it. To be honest, I was one of those freaks. I was indifferent to the RNG. I mean, sometimes it was annoying, sometimes it wasn't. People who were annoyed were people who had bad luck. I know by the time I got a Hurricane 10, it just didn't matter, and everyone just stopped playing pretty much, so there was no thrill or glory in having a Hurricane 10. But, so I'm actually not going to weigh in on whether it's good or bad. Could it be improved in a lot of ways? Yeah, I mean, one suggestion I might make is if people really want certain items, make them ultra expensive and make them invest the credits if you earn the credits. I mean, let's say you really want a Black Widow, or you really want a Wraith, or whatever the equivalents might be in the future. But to get it, you need to spend 5 million credits just to get one of them. Okay, it's expensive, but you're guaranteed to get it if you work towards that goal. If you're conservative, you save, frugal, so on and so forth. But that said, they're probably going to keep the RNG. It's too profitable. The RNG was what kept Bioware pumping out material. Some people would spend money, and through these microtransactions, of course, that's how they earned the moolah, the dinero to continue. So, kind of a double-edged sword, the RNG, and that's my take on that. But overall, if they implemented some of the things I'm suggesting, I think mission variety, more class variety. I'm not gonna, the whole. I mean, there were ridiculous threads about the lack of female this, the lack of that. It's just ridiculous. Who cares? It's just not an important issue. It never really mattered to me. I play female, male, whatever. That shouldn't be a seriously relevant issue. Let's keep that to the well. What was there? There were a bunch of people on the sociopathy forums who would spam stuff about that. So I'm not going to even talk about that. Apart from what I mentioned, not relevant. But class diversity, mission diversity, and variation, important things that can and, in my opinion, should be integrated into Mass Effect multiplayer. And it's going to be big. I'm almost convinced of it. Whatever it ends up being, it's going to be a lot better. Because if that last thing was just an experiment with all of its flaws and imperfections, then if they actually devote a concentrated amount of energy and time just knowing the structural framework, knowing the substructure, if you will. I mean, we have this substructure that was Mass Effect 3 multiplayer. We're going to build upon that. The edifice. That is a key. I'm almost convinced they're going to produce a really good product. And for that reason alone, I'm definitely, assuming all necessary variables, going to get Mass Effect 4, whatever they decide to term it, without a doubt. The game was just, for what it was, an experiment, just really fantastic. And I really got sucked in. First time in my life to get sucked in a shooter. That says a lot about old man Stardusk. And it was because of that passion that I made guides, and I did become well known in the community. And like I said, at my age, easily the best player in my age bracket, and I could certainly hold my own very well with the vast majority of the youngsters as well. So anyway, and I'm not blowing my horn, just stating the facts. So in a lot of ways, I'm looking forward more to Mass Effect, the next one, than I am Dragon Age. Although there have been rumors of Dragon Age multiplayer, but who knows what's going to happen with that. But rest assured, assuming I'm alive and healthy and functional, you will be seeing Mass Effect, whatever it's called, 4 multiplayer guides galore. Stardust will be back in action, bringing you the good guides, the mature guides, the thought-out builds. No screaming, no ranting, just mature, effective builds and creative builds for Mass Effect multiplayer, the next generation, whatever it turns out to be. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Your likes and views are very much appreciated. And if you enjoy what I have to say and you think it's worth listening to, doesn't hurt to share it throughout the ether space if you're so inclined. That would be appreciated. If not, it's cool as well. Anyway, take care. May the gods watch over you. Bye-bye.